Ukrainian forces have denied claims by Russian propagandists about the alleged capture of an industrial facility in Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. According to the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group tried to secretly approach the settlement, carrying a flag with them for a staged video, supposedly to show a victory. The sabotage and reconnaissance group was destroyed on the approach, and Ukrainian defenders carried out a sweep and published footage confirming full control over the area.
Those tactical advances that unfortunately we are seeing today in some areas of the front, they are not at all what, let's put it this way, these aren't even advances on the operational tactical level, and accordingly, they don't allow the Russians to accomplish the objectives set before them, namely the seizure of our territory and accordingly the capture of certain settlements. That's why it's absolutely expected that the propaganda machine is using fake news as a tool. And with this flag-waving flash mob, this flag planting, they're trying to make up for what they're unable to achieve right now.
The fighters of the Bulava Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after the Black Zaporozhians, carried out a unique operation and delivered what can truly be called a historic strike. For the first time, a Russian heavy flamethrower system, TOS-1A, Solntsepyok, was destroyed directly on Russian territory in the Belgorod region. 4 precise hits on the target, a powerful detonation of the ammunition, and the complete destruction of a system worth over $10 million. The Solntsepyok is one of the most brutal examples of Russian weaponry and is designed to strike with thermobaric munitions. In the Konstantinovka direction, the enemy launched offensive actions against Ukrainian positions, near the settlements of Pleshchevka, Sherbinovka, Rasinyar, as well as towards Novopavlovka and Sofievka. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian occupiers attempted to push back the Ukrainian armed forces from their positions in the areas of Rodinska, Mirnograd, Kotlin, Udachna, Molodetska, and towards the settlements of Bilitska, Novo-Oleksandrovka, and Novopavlivka. And in the Holyaypol direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled attacks by the Russian army in the areas of Doroshnyanka, Dobropilya, and Zeleny. In the
direction of activity, it's all the same as before. And the statistics reflect all this activity. The Pokrovsk-Mirnohada-Gruishing. Here, the Russians are trying to act with the highest number of engagements. Accordingly, there is a lot of activity in Holyaypol. However, today, all of this is at the level of tactical maneuvers and, to some extent, tactical advances by Russian troops. But still, there are no successes, no solutions or objectives achieved that the Russians are clearly counting on. That's why their propaganda is running ahead of reality. That's why Gerasimov and his generals are trying to claim that these victories exist. But there are no victories, in fact, and there are even defeats. A strategic defensive operation on our side continues, but in fact, the Russian offensive, their attempts to advance, we can see today, are not decreasing in terms of the level of engagement.
Near Pokrovsk, Ukrainian soldiers were saved from Russian captivity thanks to aerial reconnaissance and UAVs of the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the 7th Air Assault Corps, during an attack on an observation post, a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group captured 4 Defense Forces soldiers and tried to take them back to their rear. However, they were spotted by Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance, which quickly deployed its strike FPV drones. This disoriented and distracted the enemy, which the Ukrainian soldiers used to break free from the enemy's grasp. After that, the Russian occupiers tried to hide in bushes and trenches, but more than a dozen Ukrainian strike drones targeted them. As a result, the personnel of the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group were eliminated, and the Ukrainian soldiers were saved. Russia continues to suffer heavy losses amid its unsuccessful attempts to advance. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in the past 24 hours, the Defense Forces eliminated another 850 Russian occupiers, and the total combat losses of the Russian army since the beginning of the invasion have exceeded 1,241,000 people. Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 2 tanks, 1 armored vehicle, and air defense equipment, 25 artillery systems, 1 multiple rocket launcher, as well as nearly 150 units of enemy automotive and special equipment.
Let's discuss this topic with our guest. Ola Lesny, president of the Analytical Center for Politics, is joining our broadcast. Ola, welcome.
Good morning, Ilya. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
The floor is yours, Ola. We've gotten so caught up in the negotiation process, talking about territories and security guarantees, that maybe we haven't forgotten, but we've definitely pushed the question of Russia's responsibility for war crimes to the back burner. I understand this issue is quite sensitive, so as not to irritate the participants in Abu Dhabi and so on, and the like, but still, ideally, how should this be reflected in the final documents marking the end of the war?
In fact, from the materials that come across my desk, I don't see any mention of holding the Russian Federation accountable for what it has done, is doing, and unfortunately will still do on our territories. The logic is clear. Each side has its own, unfortunately. We want to survive, the Russians want to destroy us, and the Americans just want to wrap things up quickly and start making money. That's why it's so difficult here to reach the point of punishing the one who is the aggressor. This is completely absent from American rhetoric. In other words, the future our partners envision is that the war ends in one way or another, and then Russia can be brought back into business, so to speak. We can make money together, and it's no big deal what has happened or is happening now. This logic is flawed, but it is based on what the United States espouses to the current administration. Consider the following logic. A big country can easily afford what a small country cannot. But we have European partners who often articulate exactly what needs to be done there. Tribunal, already there. The first definite steps in this direction. But, it's hard to stay optimistic in the current situation because a tribunal is only truly effective when the aggressor is defeated and it's clearly established that they did what they're accused of. That is, just like we draw a parallel with Nazi Germany, there everything was clear and straightforward. Then there was the trial, then certain actions on the part of the Nazis. Some didn't live to see it. Some didn't want to live to see that situation. But right now, we're definitely not in that kind of historical moment. At this particular moment in time, it seems that the West, maybe collectively, maybe not, depending on how you look at it, is not actively seeking to witness the absolute and complete military defeat and total destruction of the Russian Federation. They're afraid of it. And they are currently formulating plans or actively seeking to, in some specific way, encapsulate this war like this to bring it to some kind of conclusion and stop there. Well, if that is how it eventually unfolds, then everything we are doing now, even if it results in a tactical pause, is just merely delaying and pushing back the war for an indefinite period of time in the future. No one knows for how long because we haven't even gone through the first stage of stopping this war yet.
Still, Oleg, we see that the methods, in reality, this terrible tactic of terrorizing civilians, actually might also indicate that the Russian Federation simply has very limited tools, basically for conveying, let's say, its position. This is also how they get their message across. And on the other hand, it's probably some kind of desperation, a rush. What do you think? Especially, again, in the context of these negotiations, as I understand it, this is how they're trying, so to speak, to strengthen their position, although it looks pretty strange from the outside.
It's strange because you and I are normal people and we have morals. The current Russian authorities, and even that deep-rooted part of the population that doesn't oppose these actions, they actually rejoice when all this happens. High-level politicians are demanding that more of us be killed with weapons of retribution. In other words, they're once again using the rhetoric of Nazi Germany. I wouldn't call it desperation. It's their nature, if I've chosen the right word in Russian. This is the essence of that people. I don't separate politicians from the people here. I believe they're equally to blame. If there are any good ones, Russians, then that's more of an exception. And even then, let's just say you really have to take a good look at what's going on inside them. So they've always acted this way. When they were desperate, they acted this way. When they were in the position of the victor, they acted this way too. When they had doubts, they acted this way. They kill because it's easier that way. They don't value human life. Let's put it this way. The rulers of this empire, this pseudo-empire, the Soviet connection, whoever you want to call them, they only value their own lives and the lives of their loved ones. Everything else is just a resource. And accordingly, not us. Also considering that to achieve a goal, sacrifices must be made. The more terrifying the sacrifices, the more effective the pressure will be, or so they believe. But unfortunately, even these sacrifices end up just being sacrifices because even the West no longer reacts. To these actions, it's as if they wanted it that way. The United States practically doesn't notice this at all. Rarely, very rarely did Trump force himself to say that Ukrainians are freezing, so they shouldn't be killed for a few days. Well, great. That's a really good approach. So in just a few days, it's okay to kill them, right? It's okay to freeze them and so on. That's why this regime, and even, let's say, this entity, I can't call it anything else, the Russian Federation, in its current form, it's a deeply cruel kind of substratum, probably a horde that simply kills because it's easier, because it's supposed to scare someone, and so on and so forth. But this can only be stopped by putting those who lead this horde into a difficult situation. Unfortunately, so far, I don't see any political will or opportunity from anyone, depending on whom you look at, to force Putin to be afraid and enter into real negotiations rather than just pretending to.
Oleg, we literally have 1 minute. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War say that such terrorist strikes are carried out with the intention of intimidating and demoralizing Ukrainians. But I just don't see anyone demoralized. Don't you think, Ukrainians, that this is actually a dumb and losing tactic?
You know, to put it very briefly, we have beaten them, we are winning, and we will win and drive them out. Because I don't think that we are the bad ones, the Russians are. And what? If we're beaten, we should hide? If someone yells at us, we should agree? If we're killed, then we should just give up? No, that's not in our DNA, and that's why they'll never defeat us.